On this occasion, we will discuss an interesting movie called Heretic 2024. The movie revolves around two missionaries who visit a man's home to convert him to their faith. But it turns out, they approached the wrong person. Are you curious about the rest of the story? Well, instead of taking too long, let's go straight to the full review. As always, don't forget to click the subscribe button so you can keep up with our journey through exciting movies.
Basically, same size as regular condoms.
The story begins as the two missionaries prepare to head to a man's house, based on information from the church that the man is likely to convert.
If ye receive me, fly upstairs. Yeah. Our husband, and this is my companion, Sister Paxton.
Are you interested?
My name is Sister Barnes, and to sing. I think you have a beautiful.
As they are traveling and it starts to rain heavily, they finally arrive at their destination. Before entering, they took the time to secure their bicycles by locking them firmly in case there were thieves roaming around.
Hello. It's like
As soon as the door was opened, the owner of the house who introduced himself as Rain appeared. Without further ado, the two missionaries immediately started preaching and conveyed their intention of coming there. Even though their bodies were soaked in the rain, their enthusiasm did not wane in the slightest. Seeing this condition, Rain felt bad. He invited them into the house to dry off.
Come on in.
Great.
Do you like pie?
People are always feeding us treats. We know.
While asking them to wait for a while because he had to check something first inside the house. Rain apologized that his wife could not accompany them for the time being. But the two missionaries understood the situation. All that mattered to them was that Rain showed interest in converting. Without wasting time, they immediately started discussing religion, complete with presenting the teachings and advantages of their beliefs.
I could tell that you are a very... Joseph investigated many different denominations. Joseph founded our church.
But as the discussion progressed, the atmosphere began to feel awkward. Unexpectedly, Rain suddenly deviated from the topic and started talking about someone who died from cake poisoning. The two guests tried to steer Rain back to the point, but he kept coming up with weird, creepy stories that were completely irrelevant to the original discussion. Feeling uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, one of them suggested that Rain call his wife instead.
Sorry, I will go ask.
Rain left the room for a moment. His colleague, who began to smell something wrong with Rain's behavior, immediately invited his friend to leave the house immediately. But before they had time to move, Rain returned and invited them to talk further with his wife in another room. In the midst of growing suspicion, one of them pretended to receive a call from his friend at church, as an excuse to get out faster. Seeing this as an opening, they agreed to leave the house immediately. But the situation suddenly turned tense. The door of the house felt like it was deliberately locked from the inside. They began to panic. One of them tried to find a way out through the window, but unfortunately, all the windows in the house were very small and narrow, making it impossible to pass through. When one of them tried to contact others for help, the cell phone signal suddenly disappeared, as if it had been deliberately cut off. In a state of increasing urgency, they finally decided to go back to Rain.
Mr. Reed?
But the panic intensified when they saw a black shadowy figure standing still at the end of the hallway. Nervously, they tried to find an excuse to leave immediately. One of them said that the church asked them to return immediately. Hearing this reason, Rain did not seem to mind and invited them to go home whenever they wanted. But when they were about to take the bicycle, they realized that the bicycle key was missing. In a state of confusion, they asked Rain to open the front door, which seemed to be stuck. Rain just smiled and apologized, then said that he forgot to tell them. The front door of this house was controlled by an automatic timer system, and the door would lock itself after a certain hour. Unfortunately, that time had already passed and they were now trapped inside. Rain told them that the automatic doors would only open again the next morning. The panic grew when they realized there was no way out. Seeing their suspicious expressions, Rain finally unmasked. He admitted that he had never had a wife, and also had no intention of converting. His main goal was simply to invite them to play in a trust game. Any attempt to call for help from outside would be useless, because Rain had deliberately designed this house in such a way that any signal could not be penetrated. But Rain tried to calm them down and said that the only way to get out was to play the game he had prepared. If they managed to complete it, they could leave through the back door. But there was one condition: they had to choose between belief or logic. Seeing no other way, they decided to follow his instructions. Rain then showed them an old door that led underground.
That's a basement. Outside.
They were shocked and creeped out when they realized that the door led to a pitch-black basement, with the air so cold and gripping. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the church, a pastor named Kennedy was fretting that the two missionaries had not returned. He was worried that something bad had happened to them, and decided to look for them. Back at Rain's house, he showed his guests two different doors. He told them that they were free to choose the exit according to their own beliefs. If they believed in God, then the door on the left was their choice. But if they prefer logic, then the right door is the way.
Just in. That's it. But it should not be made simply. A sincere decision.
One of them, Texture, felt that it was all a trick and a trap. He finally chose to enter the right door. Meanwhile, Baring, who had more faith in the power of God, steadfastly chose the left door. Before taking a step, Baring emphasized that even if his choice was wrong, he would still hold on to his faith and accept whatever happened with sincerity. Seeing Baring's strong conviction, Texture began to doubt his decision. He finally gave up and decided to follow Baring through the left door. But as soon as they entered, they were shocked by the fact that the door did not lead to freedom, but to a room that was dark, damp and full of pungent smells. Baring realized the existence of the air vents and started planning something.
We don't agree with challenge. He's coming.
But before they could act, there was the sudden sound of footsteps approaching, followed by the sound of objects being dragged away. It turned out that someone was returning the tables and chairs to their original places. The situation became tense. Quickly, Baring, who was now clutching a small dagger, signaled Texture to creep into the ventilation duct, while he would try to distract the oncoming person. Amidst the panic, they were surprised to see a thin, dull-skinned, and strange-looking figure enter the room. This figure seemed to have a role in the ongoing game.
Mystery.
Only then did they realize the previous two door choices were not real exits. They only led to the same place. The whole thing was part of a trap scenario. Meanwhile, the atmosphere turned tense when Radiohead's Creep started playing in the background. Rain, with a strangely excited expression, declared that he was about to perform a miracle. He pointed to a woman sitting nearby, and claimed that after she ate a piece of cake laced with poison, she would die, but would be resurrected through a miracle. Rain emphasized that as people of faith, they must believe in the miracle. He also asked them to ascertain the woman's condition after eating the cake. Upon inspection, Baring stated with surprise that the woman was lifeless.
Oh, you feel the breath? Acknowledge, please, that there's no. So she's dead.
Yeah.
A moment.
Rain seemed satisfied, then said that the woman would come back to life and after that, she would share stories about what she experienced in the afterlife. But before the show could continue, there was a sudden knock on the door from outside. Apparently, someone had come to check on the house.
He's coming.
The figure that appeared turned out to be Reverend Kennedy, who had been busy searching for the whereabouts of Baring and Texture. However, Rain pretended not to know anything. With an innocent face, he lied and said that he never received guests from the church that day. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, the trapped Baring and Texter had a desperate idea. They tried using a lighter to set fire to their coats, hoping that the smoke would attract the attention of someone outside the house. When they returned to the basement area, Texter began to feel something strange. The position of the woman's body that he had seen earlier seemed to have changed. But Baring still insisted that the dead could not rise again. But their assumptions were soon shattered when the woman suddenly woke up and spoke. She declared that the afterlife was not real, it was all an illusion or a fairy tale. Seeing their shocked and shaken reactions, Rain smiled with satisfaction. He seemed pleased to have succeeded in undermining the two missionaries' beliefs. Rain continued to emphasize that the woman's resurrection was proof that heaven and hell were myths. But Baring, who felt that this was all just a magic show designed to shake their faith, rejected it outright. He believed it was a cheap trick. A debate between the two was inevitable, hotly debating between logic and faith. In the midst of the argument, Texter, who could no longer stand it, began to prepare with his hidden weapon. Meanwhile, Baring cleverly tried to distract Rain, like a ninja from Konoha village who was deft and cunning. But Rain, who did not want to lose the argument, suddenly attacked Baring.
Stop me of that event. Just witness. But this... What?
In his dying state, Baring seemed to be doing something to his body. He pulled out an implant from under his skin. Rain then insinuated that this action showed that Baring was not a true believer. She mentions that a cleric should not have contraceptives such as birth control implants, because church ministers are considered not allowed to have intimate relationships. Meanwhile, Texter's faith began to be severely shaken. But he still tried to be strong, and invited Rain to debate directly, hoping to turn things around. After successfully uncovering the tricks used, Texter felt it was time to let it all end and leave the cursed place. Hearing Texter's conviction, Rain challenged him sarcastically, asking if Texter was sure that he could come out on top. Meanwhile, Baring with his sharp logic revealed that the resurrection of the body shown earlier was nothing more than magic. He was convinced that the resurrected woman had swapped places with someone else, rather than actually rising from the dead. Roy, who heard the analysis, realized that if it was true, there must be a secret passage or door used to make the switch. Rain challenged them again. If that's the case, then prove it. Find the secret door.
Last.
Without hesitation, Texter began combing the room and finally managed to find a hidden path that had been disguised very neatly. Rain, who was beginning to feel pressured, tried to shift focus and bait Texter by saying, "If you're sure, there must be a real body in there, right?" Reluctantly, Texter went through the dark room and examined the contents of the place. And sure enough, he was able to prove that everything that happened to them was a cunning fabrication. However, just as she realized everything, Rain closed the exit, trapping her again. In the room, Texter saw rows of doors labeled with various beliefs, including the strangest one, kinetic sakatonic. One of the doors was even locked with a bicycle padlock, which coincidentally matched the one Texter had. Upon opening it, she was stunned to find a number of women in strange outfits caged like pets. When Rain arrives, he proudly proclaims that he believes in the power of manipulation more than any spiritual belief. As it turns out, Rain has a crazy plan to form his own new religion, where his followers are not free humans, but slaves who are completely subservient to him.
Only for the same reason that your church could control someone who has lost.
Seeing this horrifying reality, Texter was devastated and despaired of being unable to save the caged women. With a heavy heart, she chose to flee in search of a way out, hoping to end this nightmare.
They even dictate.
However, every door she tried to pass through brought her back to the same place, as if the house didn't want to let her go. In the midst of despair, Baring began to feel weak. His body was ravaged by excruciating pain. Feeling his end approaching, he began to pray, begging for forgiveness, and trying to strengthen himself against the dark magic that almost destroyed his faith.
I'm grateful for your path that you've laid out for me.
Tragically, due to blood loss, Baring finally died in Texter's arms. Texter, who had almost lost everything, held back her tears and got up to leave the place. Armed with a clue from a miniature house she found, she finally managed to escape. The story closes with a painful truth. Rain turns out to be a psychopath who deliberately invited them all to the house to be victimized in a trust game full of manipulation and misdirection. However, in the end, after successfully uncovering all the tricks and traps set up, Texter is the only survivor, and manages to get out thanks to a final favor from Baring. That's all from us. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next interesting movie review.